Hi, folks. Welcome to Homeward Bound's third annual Valentine's Open Your Heart for Women in Homelessness event. And thank you for beginning your Valentine's weekend with us. We have always had this program on or around Valentine's Day because the topic of women who are homeless is very close to our hearts. Our program today is both informative and entertaining. Later in the program, we have a performance of an original song written especially for Homeward Bound by country music entertainer and Weaverville native Joe Lasher and his wonderfully talented wife, Kaitlyn Baker. Joe and Kaitlyn live in Nashville now, but haven't forgotten their roots here in Buncombe County and have written us a beautiful song called Along the Way. I want to thank Ingalls and iHeartMedia, our two presenting sponsors. We received a lot of radio promotion for this program through them, and we have close to 300 people tuning in today. Also, thank you, Ingalls, for providing the delicious box lunch for the first 200 people who registered. I don't know if you can see them there, but this is really gorgeous. This traditionally has been a lunch and learn where Ingalls served up a delicious lunch at the venue, but because of COVID-19, we've gone virtual. I can't wait to dive into my meal after the event, but you all go ahead and eat now. Ingalls has been an outstanding supporter of Homeward Bound, beginning with this event 3 years ago. If you reserved a lunch and weren't able to pick it up before the event, make sure you pick it up by 5 o'clock today. I want to let you know about your chat feature that's down at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to chat any comments throughout the program and we'll be able to see them. I'm Eleanor Ashton, Senior Resource Development Director with Homeward Bound. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, Homeward Bound is a local nonprofit whose mission is preventing and ending homelessness in our community through permanent housing and support. Since 2006, when we began using the national best practice Housing First, we've moved more than 2,170 formerly homeless individuals into their own homes, and 89% have not returned to homelessness. Most people think that putting people in housing is expensive, but in reality, it costs way more when they are living on the streets. The national average is $30,000 to $50,000 per person because of overuse of public services like emergency rooms, ambulances, crisis centers, and law enforcement. People experiencing homelessness are often arrested for nuisance crimes like urinating, sleeping, or drinking in public, all things we do in our own homes and don't get arrested for. To provide a year of housing for an individual costs $10,000 and add supportive services to that, and it goes up to $13,000. I think you'll agree that providing housing for people experiencing homelessness is not only the ethical thing to do, but is much more cost effective than having them remain on the streets. As you know, housing is essential for safety and security. Think about what it would be like to be without your home and living outside, especially in weather like this. Today, we're going to explore the intersection of homelessness and domestic violence. But before I go any further, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors who made it possible for us to have this event free of charge. They are local businesses who are committed to solving the problem of homelessness in our community. Thanks again to Ingalls and iHeartMedia, and also Nest Realty, who understands that there truly is no place like home and is proud to support Homeward Bound's Housing First mission. Home Trust Bank has served the community since 1926 and is now the only local bank headquartered in Nashville. They've been committed to helping people get into homes since their beginnings and continue to believe in that goal. Quility is a modern approach to the traditional process of shopping for and purchasing life insurance. They're dedicated to helping you protect what matters most. And I would also like to thank longstanding supporters, Self-Help Credit Union, Malaprops Bookstore and Cafe, and Pink Dog Gallery. We are proud to have the support of these local businesses. Now I'm going to review with you some national statistics on domestic violence, also referred to as intimate partner violence, or IPV. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million people. Domestic violence, or IPV, is quite prevalent in our society. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men experience IPV. Violence can take place in various forms. It can be physical, emotional, sexual, or psychological. People of all races, cultures, genders, sexual orientations, socioeconomic classes, and religions experience intimate partner violence. We're going to take an anonymous poll and see how many of you in our audience have had some type of experience surrounding domestic violence. Our communications manager, Amber Adams, is going to pull up our poll. So I think people are answering it already, which is great. First question is, I know someone who has experienced it. I have a relative who has experienced it. I have experienced it. I have witnessed it, and none of the above. So let's see, I'm going to give you a couple of more seconds to fill this out. We have 80% have voted. Love this technology. I can see what's going on. And this is an anonymous poll. All right. We'll end the polling now and share the results. Yeah, most of us have, there aren't many of us who haven't been touched by domestic violence in some form or fashion. And that stands out by, I know someone who experienced it, 50% responded to that. Yeah, 21% have a relative that have experienced it. 28% have experienced it themselves. 20% haven't witnessed it, and 17% have not had any experience with it. So Amber, you want to take down the poll now? Such violence has a disproportionate effect on communities of color and other marginalized groups. Economic instability, unsafe housing, neighborhood violence, and lack of safe and stable childcare and social support can worsen already tenuous situations. 57% of all women who are homeless report that domestic violence was the immediate cause of their homelessness. A staggering 92% of women who are homeless report having experienced severe physical or sexual violence at some point in their lives. Advocates and survivors identify housing as a primary need for survivors and a critical component in their long-term safety and stability, especially for mothers and their children. About 2/3 of mothers who are homeless have histories of domestic violence. Compared to low-income housed women, mothers who are homeless have 3 times the rate of post-traumatic stress disorder and twice the rate of drug and alcohol dependence. About 50% of homeless mothers have experienced a major depression since becoming homeless. Among homeless children, within a single year, 97% move, many up to 3 times. 22% are separated from families, and 25% witness violence. Children who are homeless experience higher rates of emotional and behavioral problems than low-income children who live in housing. And domestic violence has been on the rise because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The New England Journal of Medicine referred to it as a pandemic within a pandemic. Helpmate in Buncombe County shared with us that since the onset of the pandemic to the end of this year, they sheltered 109 more women and children than they did the previous year, which is a 57% increase. Asheville Police Department reported a 26% increase in domestic violence calls from March to September of 2020. Hotline calls increased dramatically in the first months after the pandemic began, and by the end of the year, they took 15% more calls over the previous year. You'll hear more about this topic from our panel of experts a little later in the program. But here are some numbers regarding homelessness in our community. According to the Asheville and Buncombe County 2020 point in time count, there were 557 people who were homeless, 150 of whom were women. Sadly, economists and industry experts predict that because of job loss and the economic downturn due to the pandemic, homelessness could increase by 45%. AHOPE is receiving up to 100 calls on some days. In 2020, Homeward Bound's housing program served 130 women, of which 33 moved from homelessness into housing. 64% are survivors of domestic violence, and that's probably a low estimate due to underreporting. The average age of the women we served was 45, and 10% were veterans. Last year at AHOPE, Homeward Bound's Homeless Services Day Center in downtown Asheville, we served an average of 176 people a day. Throughout the year, 2,458 individuals experiencing homelessness came to AHOPE. 863 were women. Only half completed an assessment survey, but among the half who did, we were able to determine that 60% were survivors of domestic violence. The average age was 42. So enough of these statistics. It's easy to lose sight that there are real people attached to each of these numbers, and you're going to meet one now. We're going to watch a short video of one of Homeward Bound's clients named Bronya. Bronya was homeless for 8 years, living 5 years in a tent in Pisgah Forest, where she had to watch out for copperheads, coyotes, and bobcats, and 3 more years in an RV with no electricity or running water. Growing up, Bronya experienced violence from some family members, and as an adult was in a 10-year relationship that was both verbally and physically abusive. It ultimately led to her homelessness. We want to thank Bronya for sharing her struggles with us. It's never easy for someone to relive these events, but as you'll see in this film, this feisty woman is a true survivor. After the video, our panel of experts will introduce themselves and discuss how the film relates to their professional and personal experience with women who are homeless and dealing with intimate partner violence. And then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So at the bottom of your screen is a question and answer button. And that's the one that you will snap onto and type in your question, and then Amber will ask that to the panel. Amber, can you roll the film?
I was in it for 10 years and should have got out the first time he ever hit me. I don't know why I didn't. The women when they're abused just don't know how to leave, I think. Because I didn't know how. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to deal with that. And I thought I could change him, and I could. I mean, in my head, I'm still messed up from all that. He took my truck, he took 2 cars, he took the motorhome. He destroyed the motorhome that I had by putting a backhoe bucket through the back window of it, just so I couldn't come get it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they destroy everything. Everything that you love, they'll either destroy it, kill it, or abuse it too. I would have him put in jail, and then I would get scared and not press charges. But the day I left, when I seen him kicking my dog off the porch, I got my dog and put him in my car, and I left. And I called the law. And I stuck with that one. Because I was so angry at him kicking my dog that I just left. I was hoping my mom and dad was going to let me stay up there, but I didn't know. I didn't think so, because me and my mom didn't get along. My son was homeless for a long time, and I can't judge anybody homeless, period. But my son downplayed it because I was homeless living in a tent. Oh, you weren't homeless, Mom. Yeah, I was. I mean, but I know what it's like, and I know what they go through. It's not good. You know, there'd been times when it was raining and the wind was blowing that I'd have to stand up and hold. I was only in a 6x9 tent, and I'd have to hold the sides of it up so it wouldn't blow over. You know, I'm out there by myself.
And Miranda found your home.
Miranda did.
Uh-huh.
She sure did. We went and looked at two that day. And the first one, the landlord would have been right here looking over your shoulder constantly. And I just cried. She took me back to my camper and called me back about 30 minutes later. And she said, I just found another one to go look at. You want to go? And I said, yeah, well, come get me. Let's go. So he came over here and looked at this one, and I was like, oh, man. Look at this place. It's got a big yard. Yeah, 2 bedrooms. And I thought, oh, can I really get this one? And she said, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they just did a credit check, and next thing you know, I was moving in.
I mean, you are thriving, and
I
you
am.
are at a place where you don't need me anymore, and that's just like the goal, right?
Yeah.
And so you can maintain your home all by yourself,
Oh, yeah.
and you're doing it beautifully.
This is what I always wanted to do, you know, but I didn't think I could. I thought I had to have a man to take care of me, but phew.
You are on your feet, and you are running miles.
Hi, I'm Nicole Brown, Homeward Bound's Deputy Director of Programs and Strategy. I've been with Homeward Bound for almost 10 years and have worked in many of our programs. I started out working at our A Hope Day Center, then moved over to the housing side as a case manager, and then was able to move into a leadership role as a permanent supportive housing director. And then went back to A Hope as a homeless services director, and then last fall moved into the deputy director position. So I've definitely made my round across many of our programs. But when I started working at Homeward Bound, I, like many of our case managers, got into this work because we have a passion for ending homelessness. But working on ending homelessness is so much more than just addressing a lack of housing. Our work throws us into so many other social issues and injustices, such as substance use, racial disparity, trauma, untreated mental health, and of course, the subject we're here to talk about today, domestic violence. Throughout all of my years in our various programs, I have seen many, many women who are currently living in a domestic violence situation or a survivor of domestic violence. But what is so striking to me about Bronya's story is that she was aware that she was in a domestic violence situation, which unfortunately, in my experience, is very rare. Many of the women that I've had the honor of working with have experienced such trauma throughout their lives that they don't know anything other than relationships that are abusive, to the point that they aren't even aware they are in a domestic violence situation. To them, being hit, being yelled at, being told they are worthless, and all other things you can imagine is just how they believe relationships are and what they think they deserve. When you work in this field, you hear and see horrific things on a daily basis. And often you just become numb to it all. But there are these moments that really stick with you forever. For me, it was a time when I was working at A Hope and walked into an office just to grab something off the printer. In the office was a case manager sitting with a client doing an intake for one of our housing programs. I asked if I needed to leave the room since I noticed they were doing an intake. And the client said it was no problem. They weren't talking about anything serious. I walked in the middle of the conversation, so I'm not sure what the question was or how the conversation started. But as I was standing there, waiting for my document to print, I overheard this client talking about being beaten up by her boyfriend. The words she was saying were horrific, but she was saying this as she was just recounting what she had for dinner the night before. For her, there was no emotion or pain in her voice. It was just what it was, nothing serious, her everyday. She went on to then explain about a previous night when her and her boyfriend got a ride with someone. I wasn't sure of the details if she knew the person or not, but she started to talk about how he turned the wrong direction from where they thought they were going. And he started to turn up onto Town Mountain and up to the Parkway. She said, that's when I knew something was about to happen. I'll spare you the details of what she knew, but she experienced things that evening that would have just completely destroyed me, probably would have destroyed any of us. And she was there talking about it as if it was nothing, just something that happens, nothing serious. There was no awareness that she deserved better. So for me, not having just had this one experience with this one client, but being one of many, hearing Bronya's story is incredibly encouraging to me, not just because she's a survivor and out of the situation, not because she's housed and that she's about to graduate from our program, but because she was one of the very few who were able to recognize that she was in a situation that wasn't right. To hear someone who was aware that she deserved better than having someone hit her, and who took the incredible step to choose and end up being homeless versus staying in that situation. She knows that how she was treated was not right or normal or not serious. It is serious. And our staff work every day to remind our female clients that they are worthy and deserve so much more. My hope is that her success can be an inspiration to our case managers and to our clients that there is another option and a way to build and have sustained, healthy relationships, more than just with an intimate partner, but in all of their relationships.
My name is Alana Kinsella, and I am a program manager for the Woodfin program with Homeward Bound. I, like Nicole, have been with Homeward Bound for many years, going on 6 or 7 now. And what I wanted to talk about with Bronya's video is the courage that it took her to leave. As long as I've done this work and I have focused, and even in Bronya's story, she knew that leaving that night meant that she wasn't going to have anything with her. She knew that she was going to be on her own. For years after she left, she faced nights in her tent, in a camper, by herself. Many of our clients end up staying in these relationships because their partners, even though they are abusive towards them, it's safety, it's protection. Being in the woods, being out in the cold, having somebody who's going to protect you, it may not be the best relationship, but it's going to keep you alive. As I've done this work over the years, I have seen how housing gives people the opportunity to step out of those relationships, to move forward, to make growth. I can think of several couples that we have housed together, knowing that they were in a DV relationship and knowing that that was their active choice to live together. But through the continued support of our case managers, these relationships did not last, and both partners were able to obtain housing and safety. I often think about these individuals and how hard that fight and that choice has to be, to know that you may have to step away from somebody who's protected you for so many years, but also know that if you don't, you may not have many more days left. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dory English. I am a counselor and a case manager for Help Me. I've been here about 7 years, started as a counseling intern, and basically refused to leave. So I guess they decided to start paying me at some point. But I am a survivor also. And so I have a passion to help other people who are in these situations. One of the things I also want to point out is that financial abuse is a big part of domestic violence. Here at the Family Justice Center, where our offices are located, we do walk-in services Monday through Friday. And you can walk in right off the street. You can talk to us. You can get help and get connected with Helpmate Services. Our Voice is also here. That's the sexual assault agency. The SANE nurses here. We have Buncombe sheriffs here. We have APD here. You can access the courthouse. So we get a lot of folks coming in Monday through Friday. And so many of their stories are very similar to what Bronya shared. One of the things that really sticks out to me that I also heard Bronya say is that many of these people, specifically women, have been taught from early childhood that they have to have a man to take care of them. They really just don't have an idea of how to do any of this stuff on their own. They never have. Many of them have come from abusive or at least very dysfunctional families. And so an abusive relationship, as I think like Nicole and Alana were saying, well, this just seems very normal to them. They don't like it. They don't want it, but they don't quite understand how to have something different. Abuse has been modeled, dysfunction has been modeled for them their whole lives. I think that also one of the reasons why we see a lot of homelessness is that we know that on average, a woman will leave and go back to her abuser about 5 to 7 times before they're able to leave for good. Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but you can imagine how if you had some family or maybe friends who helped you the first time and then you went back, and then they helped you the second time, and then you went back. Maybe if you're lucky, the third time. After that, folks who don't really understand the dynamics of domestic violence and all of the different things that often, unfortunately, force these women back to their abusers, without that understanding, family members and friends often just wash their hands of it. And they say, no more. I'm not going to help you anymore. You've gone back too many times. So when that woman finally is really ready to go, there's no one to help her. Now, Helpmate Shelter is almost always full. Now, we might have some folks leave, maybe last night. So perfect example, last night we had 2 beds. This morning, they were available at 9 a.m. We came to work. We started a meeting by 10:30. We got a notice that said our shelter is full again. We're up to capacity. Of course, with COVID, our capacity looks a little bit different. So, but all day long, we're going to have folks coming into the Family Justice Center. I guarantee at least a few who are going to need shelter, and we can't help them. Normally, we would reach out to partnering counties that have domestic violence shelters and see if we could get folks in there, but they're full too. And if they're not full, many of them, understandably, have some restrictions in place that right now you have to live in their county in order to get into their shelter. So then our next line is, okay, how about a homeless shelter? Well, there's a lot of issues with that as well. Specifically right now, you have to have a COVID test before you can get into a homeless shelter. If you come to us at 3:30 and say, oh my gosh, I need shelter, and the cutoff for getting into, let's say the rescue mission is 4 o'clock. Well, how do you go get a COVID test? What if you don't have any transportation? What if you don't even know where to go? So how are you going to get that done to get into the homeless shelter? And one of the other things we hear a lot is that women say, oh, absolutely not. I'm not going to go to one of those shelters. Either my abuser goes there, or he has people there who will know me, or they've had some sort of, unfortunately, a very bad experience before. And so they're no longer, that does not feel safe to them. It feels safer to them to live out on the street. One of the other things that we see a lot is that, as one of the other panelists said, we get folks who come in who say, I'm not sure if this is domestic violence, but somebody in my life told me I should come here. So, we use the power and control wheel. I think anybody who probably knows anything about domestic violence is familiar with that piece of paper. It is, I think, used by most DV agencies. And once we're able to, let them or help them see, like, yes, this is an abusive relationship, then we move on to, they don't know what to do. How do they leave? It's too dangerous. And so they need a plan. Not only a plan, but a safety plan. There's a lot of things that we know that abusers do when women leave. Things like take their medication, destroy their ID, get rid of the birth certificates, maybe for them and the kids. All these things make it much harder for these women to then get some sort of housing, because now they need time to replace all these things. In the meantime, where do they go if every place is full and nobody in their life is any longer willing to help them? So that's a lot of the things that we do here at Helpmate. One of the other things that I very much enjoyed the whole time I've been here is that I teach the domestic violence education classes. And so many folks come in, and perhaps they're mandated by DSS to be there. That's the only thing that we do, that we take mandated DSS clients into. But they come in and they just have no idea of actually what is domestic violence. They might say, well, I'm married to this man, and so I don't have a right to say no to sex whenever he wants it. And then when we explain to them, like, yes, that is partner rape, and it is not legal nor okay, it opens their eyes. That seems to be the big one that kind of opens their eyes to all this other misinformation they've been taught all their life, such as you have to submit to this man. He gets to do whatever he wants to you because he's the head of the household, so to speak, or perhaps married. So I have really enjoyed being able to provide a good bit of education to folks who are in this position. And a couple of years ago, one of the things we realized was that, we were teaching folks about domestic violence and abusive relationships and unhealthy, trauma bonds, etc. But a lot of them had never seen a healthy relationship, had no idea what one looked like, nor how to be in one. So I was privileged enough to be given the opportunity to create 2 classes for our 8-week or 8-class session of this domestic violence education course. And those 2 classes are all about healthy relationships. And one of the biggest things we work on are boundaries. Most of us weren't really taught boundary work. Maybe somebody when we were little said, hey, nobody can touch you here and here, and if they do, come tell me. But that's the extent of the boundary work. And I have sort of come to believe that, that issue of a lack of boundaries through no fault of our own, because you don't know what you've never been taught, but that seems to be one of the big things that I think lends itself to becoming a victim of domestic violence. When things happen, you just don't know what to do. So these are a variety of the things that Helpmate does. We, through this whole pandemic, have, as Eleanor said, we have seen such an increase in requests for our services. Mainly, I just do the counseling, but we have a wait list that is crazy long. Our hotline is just ringing off the hook. Walk-ins have gone up. Shelter requests have gone up, and it's really been a difficult time. Luckily, with the help of all of our community partners like Homeward Bound, we're still continuing to offer services and do the best that we can to try to address what really is a pandemic within this pandemic. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Liz Sanford, and prior to January, I was the Rapid Rehousing Director here at Homeward Bound. Currently, I'm taking some time off because COVID has caused 4 of my children to be home from school, which is making full-time work difficult right now, but I hope to be back working with Homeward Bound whenever things get back to normal. Before I moved to Asheville, I worked in Los Angeles doing similar work at a homeless service agency there. I developed policy with the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority. I ran a rapid rehousing team, and I worked on a street outreach team. So my work with Homeward Bound centered initially mostly with veteran homelessness and eviction prevention. Back in March when COVID hit, our grant from the VA directed us to temporarily house as many unsheltered veterans as we could, as quickly as we could, to hopefully stop the spread of the virus. Obviously, our population of homeless veterans is very susceptible to illness of any kind. And so it was a mad dash to get everyone quarantined and in motel rooms as quickly as possible. We were able to do this by partnering with a few local motels who have been great assets and quickly enabled us to start programs in each of their motels to shelter unsheltered veterans. Since then, we've had anywhere between 30 and 40 homeless veteran families in our motels, mostly in East Asheville. In order to do it sustainably and responsibly, we also quickly hired teams of people to work out of the motels to not only serve our clients and staff, but also to help motel staff who obviously aren't trained in social work deal with any behavioral issues that might arise in a trauma-informed way. So, and even with all the chaos, it ended up being a great asset to our community with this low barrier model of intensive case management. But even so, with the progress that we made housing people and working with people that closely, we had a new kind of 24/7 view into the issue of domestic violence in this population that we had never had before as being just housing case managers, at least in the program I worked on. I know in August, statistics coming out of a Boston hospital talked about a significant rise in domestic violence in people they saw coming into the emergency room since COVID hit. And we definitely saw the same trajectory in our motel project, witnessing our veteran households, specifically our couples coming into the motel. Issues that are causing this rise are there for both housed and unhoused population. So all of our homeless folks experience the same contributing factors as our folks who were experiencing eviction and loss of housing. So just, rise in stress levels, self-medicating, substance abuse rises in order to deal with the stress levels, loss of job. A lot of people had total loss of monetary income. And then already in the world of homelessness, they're extremely isolated from a lot of supports that we think are normal and from community. And this just exacerbated it, tenfold and kept folks completely isolated, especially in couples. They were isolated together without any outside influence or support. And this all came together, obviously, to just cause a huge explosion in the number of interpersonal violence events that we saw in our little microcosm motel project since March. So since then, we saw 7 cases of domestic violence, firsthand witnessed, experienced, and intervened with, which was, a huge increase from the year prior, where we had 1 case of domestic violence in our program that we knew of. And admittedly, this really close contact with people in a 24/7 scenario, also just opened our eyes to how often it happens when we're not there. So all 7 cases involved law enforcement, and the motel staff were involved. Some of them were involved with Helpmate also, which is an amazing resource. But luckily, our grant is actually really progressive in how it deals with domestic violence issues. So our grant through the VA allows us to split a household up. So for example, if there's an abuser, and let's just say the abuser is the veteran, which makes them eligible for our program. And if there is a domestic violence issue in which the abuser is the veteran and the survivor is not the veteran, we are allowed to split that household up we can continue to serve the abuser and seek housing for the abuser, but we are also allowed to take the survivor, give them a new case manager, restart the clock in terms of the money they receive and financial assistance they receive while they're in their program and months of rental assistance they receive, and totally separate them 100% and give them complete anonymity from the abuser. So we were able to do that 5 times out of the 7 times. The 2 that we were not able to do that with, one was in one of our rapid rehousing non-veteran programs, which doesn't allow for that sort of flexibility. And the other one, the survivor chose to leave town and move back in with family somewhere else. But it was honestly like the first time since the year before we had one case where we were able to do this successfully. It was a huge eye-opener to us to be able to like dig into this rule and use it and rehouse 5 folks with this rule. So I guess my experience with domestic violence comes sort of more on the ground this year experientially than officially, but it was definitely very eye-opening for all of us. And yeah, we were very happy to, both have the motel project to shed light on this issue, and then also have our grant back us up and be able to offer survivors such great service. That's all I got.
Thank you all so much for sharing your perspectives with us. This has been incredibly insightful. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. The first being, do you find that most women that are survivors often have poor family relationships?
I would speak to that, if I may. I would say I probably have a caseload of counseling clients that's around 40 or so active right now. And I would feel very comfortable saying that about 80% of them sure have had and still maybe do have some very difficult relationships with their family, whether it was abuse or just for whatever reason they don't get along. But I think that that's probably one of the main reasons why they don't have that family support when they decide to leave this abuser. So yes, that would be my answer.
Yes, I would agree with what Dory said. And as Bronya said in her video, she said she couldn't go back to her mom's, or she hoped that she could, but they didn't get along. And that is definitely something that I've seen, is that they either came out of a family situation where their parents were in a domestic violence situation, or just had a lot of trauma. And so they don't have that relationship. And especially when we're talking about women in homelessness, they definitely have had a breakdown in their family support system somewhere.
I also believe that that a lot of women have seen this history of abuse and have learned to tolerate it. I also, think about how many of the survivors have been isolated from their family and their friends and their loved ones. And how, the abuser takes that role of trying to make sure to isolate the survivor so that when they do leave, they don't have anything, and their likeliness of returning is going to increase. And I believe that the abuser, takes hold of that and uses that power to their advantage.
Anybody else have anything to add? All right, we'll move on to the next question. The next question is, I find it interesting that Bronya's catalyst for leaving was to protect her dog. I would think that protecting children would be a catalyst, but I usually do not see homeless children on the street, but I have seen pets. What happens with women and children?
So speaking from coming from AHOPE and doing our intake process there, a lot of time there are a few more resources that are available for women and children for sheltering. What is hard is if the family unit has anybody who is over a particular age. And so you'll often see that moms sometimes may get split up from their 16-year-old sons in a shelter. So those are the families we tend to see more out in the public, families that may look at being broken or split up during the shelter process. Also, the shelter can be a risk because they are vulnerable of being seen in the community, whether it's by the abuser or by another friend or family member of the abuser. We do have some really great programs for women and children around here, but as always, there's never enough services.
Great. So our next question is, what is the connection to underlying or undiagnosed mental illness, especially harder to diagnose illnesses such as bipolar or borderline?
I would say that we see that their undiagnosed mental illness obviously leads to a lot of homelessness for many of the folks we work with, for a variety of reasons. You know, some of them have a mental illness that includes paranoia. They don't feel safe going anywhere, like not even our shelter. Oftentimes they're fearful that they're being followed and persecuted. And the thing of it is that they might be, because sometimes even if their story sounds outlandish and crazy, it really is happening and it's really the truth. But they also, many times, you know, when they go to sort of setting aside the housing properties, but if they go to meet a landlord that maybe we're trying to set them up with, if they're not presenting in a way that maybe is kind of socially acceptable because they have a mental illness, they often don't get that place. And they're often overlooked for that. So in my experience, I would say that there's a big connection, I believe.
Yeah, I would say in my program, in addition to what Dory said, women, especially homeless women, often self-medicate with stimulants to stay up all night in an effort to avoid being asleep and vulnerable to sexual assault and assault in general, which is a huge problem for homeless women. And so self-medicating with stimulants also, links them up with a spiral of mental health. So like if there's like a underlying bipolar diagnosis or schizophrenia or something like that, use of methamphetamine or something can jumpstart that. And then it's this cycle that definitely adds to what Dory said in terms of not presenting as socially acceptable. And I would say that's also a huge factor for homeless women staying with abusers, is that they, even if the abuser is abusing them, it's often safer for them on the street than just being without anyone to protect them in that vulnerable state.
I also like to add that what we know about substance use and mental health is that substance use tends to be a coping mechanism. It's an escape from the reality. And for anybody who has survived domestic violence and finds themselves sleeping on the streets or in a shelter, it may be a little bit easier for them to find a coping mechanism that most of society doesn't find acceptable, but to them works and keeps them safe.
Great, thanks guys, those are great answers. The next question is, what role does white supremacy culture's emphasis on patriarchy play in interpersonal violence?
I'd like to jump in there. What we see and what I see, especially in my classes that I teach, it plays a huge role. There are from what I hear, right, there are a number of counties that seem to be kind of like a good old boy sort of situation. And if the victim of the domestic violence calls law enforcement and they come, and let's say that the perpetrator is a white male who's, maybe it's a small town and he's known there, he doesn't really get in much trouble. We see that, and I don't know that this is true for everywhere, but what we do see here is that our oftentimes over in the courthouse or law enforcement responses to abusers seem to be different for people of color as opposed to white people, and that there's not a lot of protection from all of, now many of the law enforcement officers are wonderful, but there are some that really feel like, hey, this is his home and you're kind of his property and he's not going to get in trouble. And if he goes to court, he's just going to get a little slap on the wrist. And then she, the victim, the survivor, now is maybe involved with DSS and now she's in trouble, but he is not. But we really do see a difference between the way that, abusers of color are treated and abusers who are white.
Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I think that when you're talking about domestic violence, it's really important to understand the power and control cycle. And so anytime that somebody has power and control, it's going to lead to that. And I definitely would say that white supremacy has a big influence in those things. It's not everything, but the main thing to remember is that the abuser has the power and the control. They have worked hard to break down that community. And like Dory was saying, when they're going to court, it's really eye-opening to see how many white males are let go because they're in their fancy press suits. And they have the house, they have the cars, they're fighting to get the children. And she is left to walk away with a backpack of very few belongings that she managed to escape with. So I think overall that power and control is the main player in this dynamic of a relationship.
Thank you. So the next question is, for those who want to leave an abusive situation with their pets, can your housing accommodate pets, or do you coordinate with outside agencies such as the Humane Society to help with pet sheltering and care?
So pets is always a complicated situation. Oftentimes, many of our folks experiencing homelessness, their pet is their support, is their constant, is their safety. And so we do whatever we can in homeless services at Homeward Bound to make sure that pets are taken care of. We have food available for pets. Pets are allowed in our day center. Unfortunately, though, many of our shelters do not allow pets. We do work with local pet shelters to be able to get an animal in temporarily while someone's experiencing homelessness, if they are needing to go to detox or something similar. But in our housing programs, emotional support animals are required by law to be allowed. Every landlord has to allow them. It just requires a doctor's note, and we definitely work with our clients because we understand how important that relationship with a pet and how important it can be, especially for our folks that have experienced a lot of trauma.
All right, the last question we have is, are women able to receive COVID relief checks that could help them?
Yes, our staff have spent countless hours getting folks connected with the relief checks. I think that, both rounds, we've been able to connect the majority of our clients, both in homeless services and housing services, with that financial support.
All right. Thank you all so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Eleanor.
Hi, folks. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for your questions. That was incredibly informative and thought-provoking. If you have further questions, you can always contact Homeward Bound or Helpmate, and we can get you your answers. Before Joe Lasher and Kaitlyn Baker perform their song Along the Way, I'd like to offer you some action steps on how you can help. First and foremost, if you are experiencing domestic violence or if you know someone who is, please contact Helpmate. Helpmate offers free emergency shelter, counseling, and support for survivors of domestic violence. Call their hotline 24/7 at 828-254-0516 for a trained support person who will confidentially help you explore your options. Second, please donate your gently used furniture and household supplies and toiletries to Homeward Bound's Welcome Home Donation Center in Woodfin. We use these community donations to move Homeward Bound clients and Helpmate clients out of homelessness and into furnished apartments with all the supplies they need to begin their lives in their own homes. And last but not least, a group of committed women who are passionate about ending homelessness in our community have created a gift match of $5,000. I want to thank Barbara Love, Nancy Marr, Millie Elmore, Neely New, and Carrie Johnson. Thanks to these women, every donation made today will be matched dollar for dollar up to $5,000. And the funds raised will go to support case managers who work with women at Homeward Bound's A Hope Day Center. Walking into A Hope is the first step toward housing, and also where folks can get a cup of coffee, a warm pair of socks, take a hot shower, and get in from the cold. It's also a safe haven for women escaping domestic violence and facing homelessness. You can read a beautiful story about that written by case manager Rachel Ingram on the homepage of our website at homewardboundwnc.org. And if you're interested in donating and helping us reach the $5,000 gift match, please text the word home to this number, 888-403-4489. Thank you. All right, now I'm so honored to introduce to you the very talented Joe Lasher and Kaitlyn Baker.
Hey y'all, I'm Joe Lasher.
And I'm Kaitlyn Baker.
We're excited to team up with Homeward Bound to help make a difference and raise awareness to end homelessness.
We put our heads and our hearts together to bring you guys this song, and we hope it encourages you to make an impact.
You can make your donations at www.homewardboundwnc.org/donations.
Without further ado, here's our song.
It's called Along the Way.
17, she found what she thought was love. Gave him everything she could, yeah, 'cause he made her feel like 10 feet tall, and never thought he would let her fall. But time goes on and uncovers ugly truth. In the mirror in her eyes, she sees abuse. In her cry to get back on her feet, she walked out on the lonely street. But every broken road has to come to an end, 'cause at the end is where you learn to live again. In the darkness you can always find a light, where you can take the wrong and you can make it right. There's another road, choose a different path, find a helping hand to get you off your back. Stay strong, keep on, 'cause there'll be better days, and you'll find yourself along the way, along the way.
started to test his patience. So he settled for self-medication and found himself cold under the city lights, with nowhere to lay his head to sleep at night. He holds a sign that says freedom ain't free, 'cause it cost him everything.
Every broken road has to come to an end, 'cause at the end is where you learn to live again. In the darkness you can always find a light, where you can take the wrong and you can make it right. There's another road, choose a different path, find a helping hand to get you off your back. Stay strong, keep on, 'cause there'll be better days, and you'll find yourself along the way. Every broken road has gotta come to an end, 'cause at the end that's where you learn to live again. In the darkness you can always find a light. There's another road, choose a different path, find a helping hand to get you off your back. Stay strong, keep on, 'cause there'll be better days, and you'll find yourself along the way, along the way, along the way.
Wow. That song makes me cry. Thank you so much, Joe and Kaitlyn, and thank you all for tuning in today. We so appreciate your interest in women and homelessness and domestic violence. Also, thank you, Melissa Level, for making the connections with Joe and Kaitlyn. It's a beautiful song. We hope you learned a lot about how domestic violence impacts women who are homeless. Please open your heart and help us achieve the $5,000 gift match. You can donate through next Friday and it'll go toward the match. Thanks again to our sponsors, Ingalls Markets, Nest Realty, iHeartMedia, Home Trust Bank, Quility, Pink Dog Gallery, Self-Help Credit Union, Malaprops Cafe and Bookstore. And thank you to our gift match donors, Nancy Marr, Millie Elmore, Barbara Love, Carrie Johnson, and Neely New. And so much appreciation for Joe and Kaitlyn and our terrific panel members. Enjoy the weekend and have a great Valentine's Day.
17, she found what she thought was love. Gave him everything she could, yeah, 'cause he made her feel like 10 feet tall. And never thought he would let her fall. But time goes on and uncovers ugly truth. In the mirror in her eyes she sees abuse. In a cry to get back on her feet, she walked out on the lonely street. But every broken road has to come to an end, 'cause at the end is where you learn to live again. In the darkness you can always find a light, where you can take the wrong and you can make it right. There's another road, choose a different path, find a helping hand to get you off your back. Stay strong, keep on, 'cause there'll be better days, and you'll find yourself along the way, along the way.
He flew back from fighting for the red, white, and blue. Every night he dreams about what he'd been through. Yeah, started to test his patience. So he settled for self-medication and found himself cold under the city lights with nowhere to lay his head to sleep at night. He holds a sign that says freedom ain't free, 'cause it cost him everything.
Every broken road has to come to an end, 'cause at the end is where you learn to live again. In the darkness you can always find a light, where you can take the wrong and you can make it right. There's another road, choose a different path, find a helping hand to get you off your back. Stay strong, keep on, 'cause there'll be better days, and you'll find yourself along the way. Every broken road has gotta come to an end, 'cause at the end that's where you learn to live again. In the darkness you can always find a light.